Ever get kind of frustrated with how often tech companies get slapped with those monopoly lawsuits while your cable company, the one you're kind of stuck with, flies under the radar?
Yeah.
We got a listener question about this, actually. Pointed us to this thread on Reddit. Explain, like, I'm five, I think it
Oh,
was.
nice.
People had some thoughts, let me tell you. But it's a good question, right? Like, why does it seem like tech gets all the scrutiny? Let's dig into this.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because it kind of bumps up against this whole idea of natural monopolies in economics.
Mm.
Basically, situations where having a bunch of companies all trying to do the same thing with infrastructure just wouldn't make sense.
Right, and the Reddit thread had some pretty colorful examples of this. Like, imagine a bunch of different companies all digging up your street to lay their own internet cables.
Yeah.
Total chaos, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that cost, the initial cost of, laying those cables, setting up the network, that's a huge barrier to entry for anyone trying to compete.
So you're kind of stuck with whoever gets there first.
In a lot of areas, yeah, pretty much. They've got that advantage right out of the gate.
Mm.
And then you bring in the whole local government angle.
Because they get those kind of exclusive deals sometimes, right?
Exactly. I
That.
mean, in exchange for building that infrastructure, often, yeah, there's an understanding. Sort of a, you provide this essential service, we won't let a zillion competitors pop up situation.
Makes sense in a way, like, I don't know, could get messy otherwise. But that's different from how these tech companies blew up, isn't it?
Completely. Google, Facebook, it's all about code, data, that kind of thing. No
Yeah.
need to dig up the streets for that.
Right, global reach right from the jump. And whether what they offer is essential, well, that's a whole other deep dive right there.
Mhm.
But that gets to what really got people fired up in the thread. Just because a company can dominate without laying a single foot of cable, does that mean they should?
Now that is the question, isn't it? And that's where it gets even more complicated, moving from natural monopolies to, well, are these tech giants using their power fairly?
Yeah, and that's where the lawsuits start flying, right? But what makes what they're doing different enough from our cable company example? Because the end result, at least for us, feels kind of similar. We're stuck with limited choices. So we've got these tech companies, right? Building these huge, I don't know, digital empires or whatever. But they aren't out there laying cables like our cable company example.
Right, right.
So what's the problem? Why all the lawsuits?
Well, it comes down to like specific practices, things that are seen as, anti-competitive, not just being big, but how they use that size to, I guess, squash the competition.
Okay, so like what? Give me an example.
Sure. One that the Reddit thread brought up that I thought was interesting was this idea of like buying up potential rivals before they become a real threat.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've heard of that. But isn't that just like smart business?
Well, on the surface, maybe. I mean, a big company sees a smaller company with a cool new technology. They buy them up. The smaller company gets resources, maybe a wider audience. The bigger company gets to add that tech to what they offer.
Yeah.
Everybody wins, right?
Mm. Well, not everybody.
Exactly. Because sometimes it's not really about, integrating that new tech. It's about making sure that smaller company doesn't become a competitor.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So they just like absorb them before they can get big enough to be a problem.
And that's a big no-no in the antitrust world.
Yep.
Because it can mean less innovation, and potentially higher prices for us if there's less competition driving things.
Makes sense. It's like in Monopoly, right? You buy up all the property so no one else can build houses or hotels.
Exactly. Everyone else is stuck just circling the board, paying rent every time they land on your space.
Yeah.
Not a fun game.
Not fun at all. Okay, what else? What about this whole hoarding talent thing? That was another one people were talking about.
Yeah, so that's basically when these companies, they throw tons of money, amazing benefits, all that, at attracting and keeping the best and brightest in the field.
Which, again, seems like smart business, right? You want the best people working for you.
Sure, in a vacuum. But when it gets to a point where a few companies are sucking up all the top talent, it makes it really tough for smaller companies or startups to compete. They can't even get their foot in the door.
Right, right. It stifles the whole playing field. Like, if only one team can afford to hire star players, the other teams don't stand a chance.
Exactly. And then, on top of acquisitions and talent, you've got this whole other thing where companies leverage their power in one area to control a completely different, but often related market.
Okay.
The example that the Reddit thread used was Google with its ad technology.
Yeah, Google Ads, right. They're huge in search and then use that to what?
Well, they were accused of using their dominance in search to give their own ad platform an unfair advantage, making it harder for other companies to compete, even if those companies had really innovative ad tech of their own.
So it's like they're the biggest fish in one pond, and they use that to control a whole other pond.
Kind of, yeah. It's complicated, and where the line is between, like, good business and anti-competitive behavior isn't always clear. But one thing is for sure, the stakes are high.
Yeah, no kidding. This is some serious stuff. It's a mess, right? Like, we want these companies to do well, come up with cool stuff, but not like squash everyone else on the way there.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And it kind of brings us to, like, what do we do about it? More rules, tougher laws? Or is there another way to approach this whole thing?
Well, some people in that Reddit thread had some interesting ideas. Like, what if cities, local governments, they owned the actual internet infrastructure, like how they do with roads and stuff?
Oh, right, like that municipal broadband model.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like one company controlling the whole game. Everyone's playing on a level field.
At least in theory, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the idea, right? More competition, better prices for us, maybe even better service.
Right, because right now it's like, what are you going to do? You need internet. You're kind of stuck with whatever you can get.
Right, you don't have a ton of choices most places. But, there are definitely some hurdles with that whole municipal thing. Like, first off, you need the money to build it all out, and that's not always easy.
Yeah. Convincing people to spend tax dollars on like internet cables. Good luck.
It's a tough sell. Sure. And then, there's always the question of whether the government could actually run something like that effectively. I mean, technology changes so fast.
It's true. It's true. They can barely keep the website updated.
Right. So it's a challenge. This whole thing is a challenge, really. There are no easy answers, just like different paths with different, I don't know, pros and cons, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we started off with this question of like, hey, why do tech companies get in more trouble than cable companies? Seems kind of straightforward, right?
Yeah, you think it'll be a quick answer, but
Next thing you know, we're talking about like the future of the internet and like who should be in charge of it all.
it's a big question and an important one, too. I mean, this stuff affects all of us every day.
For real. So, to our listener who sent in this question, hopefully this got you thinking, gave you some stuff to mull over, because let's be real, this conversation about how we deal with technology, keep things fair, it's not going away anytime soon. So, keep those questions coming. We'll keep digging into them, keep the conversation going. And for everyone else, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll catch you next time.